is make sure you stop the broadcast. But we should now be able to switch back.
Hey, there it is.
Okay, awesome. And
All right,
so you
thank
should
you
be
very
able
much.
to flip over to the other window here to get your notes.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Okay. All right, I'm gonna get started. For those of you who can't see the massive screen in front of me here, this is Drupal Yoga. We're going to be creating a flexible website using paragraphs and the Bootstrap theme. So a little bit about me, because you're probably sitting here wondering who I am and who I am in terms of being able to tell you what to do. My name is Andy Brown. I've been doing HTML since I found a book of my dad's, Learn HTML in 24 Hours, and built some really, really horrible websites using that. And then I've started working on Drupal since about 07 when I graduated college, and decided to try to build my own CMS and realized very quickly that smarter people have done a much better job than I have. So I picked Drupal. I work at Genuine in Boston, just across the river there, but I'm actually from New Hampshire. Not that it means a lot, but if I'm weird, that's probably. All right, so it means something to some of us. That's even better. One really important thing to know is that I'm not a designer. We'll revisit that. I also like long walks on the beach, sunsets, puppies, that sort of stuff. So you know who I am, and so now let's get into what we're going to do. We're going to talk about kind of the history of content entry, how it's been done in the past. And then we're going to talk about how to make it less frustrating for people who don't enter content on the regular. People like my mother who owns a preschool, and I made the mistake of building her website 3 or 4 years ago as a Christmas present, building that website for her now. And then we're going to get into a little bit of code. I'm not going to bore you to death with it, but we'll touch on it a little bit just so you can have some examples. And then at the end, I'm going to post this to the internet, and so you can steal all my code examples and use them as your own. So the new hotness, it's not even that new, it's not even that hot anymore, but I just like saying new hotness. The new hotness of web development is kind of threefold. We have the fact that we need to have responsive design. If you saw the keynote, you know that we're not designing on just desktops anymore. It's a lot, mobile focus is a lot bigger than it used to be. Bless you. We also need to have a flexible and easy content management system for people, again, like my mother. I'm not going to tell you how old she is because she'll kill me, but she's of an older generation than myself. She, again, older people, doesn't really like technology, but, well, she likes it, but she's not very good at using it the way it's meant to be built. So she can break things very easily. I need to have a modern look and feel, and this is, again, where I'm going to remind you that I am not a designer, I'm a developer. So we need to figure out a way to make things look good for people like me who are just trying to build stuff for their mom in their spare time. So in order to meet those criteria, I think that was in there. We're going to move on. Although, to be fair, that mustache won me $700 in a contest, so you can laugh, but $700. All right, so we can't just approach this from one side or the other. The front end side of things is going to take care of some of this for us, but it's not really built for content entry. Some people might argue me with that, but for the most part, we're going to need a back-end solution for this to make things easier to add this content, and then we're going to need a way to make it responsive on the front end. And again, because I'm a developer, we're going to talk about the back end first, because this is my presentation. So basically, since Drupal has been around, it's been really good at making structured content. And what I mean by that is kind of like Mad Lib style content, where you have your form on the back end of all the fields that need content. And then what it'll do is it'll plug all that content into the front end and make things look pretty. It'll fit into the design that we've spent so much time working on. Well, because again, not a designer. But this has worked really well for up until pretty recently. And it still works really well for content that's modularized, things that are going to be the same over and over again. Things like an employee bio, where it's going to have an image and a name and some text and that sort of thing. It's going to look the same over and over again, and the user, the content entry person, isn't going to need to have any say in what it looks like. They're just going to add the actual content, and it's going to show up the way it shows up all over the place the same way. Another good example is like calendar events, things like that. We have the same content over and over again, but this breaks down when we have more malleable content. And so things like editorial content like blog posts. Let's say I have a blog, which I do, and I'm not going to share it with you because you don't need to see that. But let's say I want to write about giving presentations in rooms that I wasn't expecting, or talking about responsive content. One of these, that sort of blog post is going to have a lot of maybe technical detail, a lot of text heavy, with some code examples and pictures like this that kind of go back and forth. And like I said before, I like puppies, so maybe I want to write another blog post about puppies, and that's literally just going to be pictures and pictures of puppies, slideshows and image galleries, and those two things you can't build very well with this sort of structure because the content's going to be so different. And our old solution used to be the WYSIWYG. And we've spent a lot of time trying to make that user-friendly while still working. And the famous, at least where I used to work, the famous saying was, it's as easy to use as making a Word document or writing an email, because that was supposed to be the idea. What we didn't tell them, what the caveat was, that that's true as long as they didn't want to add any images and make them work, and everything still had to be responsive, and it didn't have to look good, which of course it has to. And so we'd end up trying to make this really flexible content for them, but we'd end up giving them the keys to the castle and hoping they don't ruin anything. And I'm sure you've all met people like my mother who immediately will find a way to ruin every page that I give her access to. Sorry, Mom. So we'd end up with something like this. It would start off nice. We would maybe have one or two of these different toolbars at the top, just some basic things that they can enter. And then they ask for more, and they ask for more, and it ends up looking like this. And now we've kind of lost control. We don't have a way to make this image that, if you look at the scroll bars, probably goes out to about here, and probably down somewhere in the basement in terms of size. we don't have a way to make this, one, fit into our theme, again, that we spend so much time on. There's so many options. And two, we can't really make this responsive because we don't know what they're going to put into here. So, and this is what I end up calling, this works really well for documents. So like we're talking about the Word documents before. This works really well because a Word document is 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, and that's not going to change. I mean, you can change this sheet of paper, but you know what you're getting into, and that's what it's going to end up being. But now that we're trying to kind of flex things around and all that sort of stuff, we end up having these sorts of ideas. So this is where the paragraphs module comes in. And I don't know if anybody here familiar with paragraphs, not familiar with paragraphs? Yeah? Okay, so we've got a couple. This is similar to the old field collections module, but it's kind of that a little bit on steroids. You can reuse different versions of it, and works with, you can add multiple versions of them, you can reorder them, there's all stuff we'll get into in a little bit. But the basic idea, if you remember the old one of these that I had up, it's a little bit different. So what we now have is we have these components of content on the back end, on our left side here in the form. And on the right side, those match to almost slices of content. So there is a little bit of work on our end in terms of teaching content entry users a different way of creating content, because we're no longer just kind of slapping everything into a WYSIWYG and just seeing how it looks. And we're now kind of stacking different rows of content on top of each other and building pages that way. And again, this is where paragraphs comes in handy, because we can create as many different rows as we want. We can create and mix and match as many different kinds of paragraphs as we want. So just as a basic example here, I have, it's a little tough to read. That's an image paragraph that I've made, and it literally just has a place to upload an image. The next one is a text image paragraph, which has a text field and an image upload. And the last one, if you want to go nuts, we can create this video playlist paragraph, which has a select list of a bunch of videos, and you can create as many of these again as you want in any order that you want. You can just keep adding them as we go. And then what they'll do is they'll create this kind of structured content on the other end of things. So we're still giving me and my blog authoring self the ability to create things that are very image heavy. I can just keep creating images and adding images and things like that. Or I can start creating paragraphs that have code blocks in them. And so we can start giving users different pieces that they can use to then build this content without giving them that whole keys to the castle with the WYSIWYG content. All right, so that's the back end idea. Now, so we're going to keep this in mind while we're talking about the front end. And again, things haven't changed. Still not a designer. So when I started looking for ways to integrate paragraphs into Drupal 8 with something that looked nice on the front end, these are the three things I came up with. It's got to look nice. It's got to be responsive. And again, I can't be responsible. And so when a developer goes looking for things like that, and probably just, I imagine I Googled that. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself. I apologize. So the one thing I want to point out before I got into this is that there's actually a very large difference. And the reason I keep saying I'm not a designer is because I have, all of this is boilerplate stuff. I like to say that there's a huge difference between being creative and artistic, and that I'm living proof. Because this is literally the extent, I can't emphasize this enough, this is the extent of my artistic ability. And that wasn't even supposed to be a horse at the beginning. I just wrote horse because that's what it ended up looking like. Like this is what we're talking about. So, like me, want to actually make a website that looks nice and doesn't look like the website version of that. What do we use? We use Bootstrap because it's is the easiest thing. It has everything we need already built in. We've got accordions, we've got alerts, we've got carousels, we've got little cards of information. We've got even the lists look nice and fancy. And I don't have to do anything. I don't have to work my magic on anything in terms of front end. That's for the more talented people like you out there that are me. So I'm just going to touch on the Bootstrap grid because this was kind of eye-opening to me, and it kind of tied everything together. But the way that Bootstrap makes things responsive is that it uses rows, divs of rows, and then inside those are divs with columns. And you basically, probably preaching to the choir here, but this is a quick way of making content that is a responsive grid. I apologize. So the classes on the column divs here, these are what are going to set the width of the column, and it's out of 12. And the reason I found out that it's out of 12 and not a random number like 10 is because 12 can be split much more easily. It can be split in half really easily with 6, and there's no decimals. And the same with thirds and quarters, which is kind of all we really need to do. If you start getting more than 4 items in a row, we're probably going to get into trouble. So this is a really easy way of starting to create this stacks of responsive rows of content. And what I mean by responsive is the content, like we don't have to do anything in terms of making this responsive if we have Bootstrap going. It'll start with mobile and tablets. It'll rearrange some things, and then on desktop it'll do more. And what I mean by that is this is mobile, and the letters in front of the numbers there, you got S, M, and L. Those are just notation for the screen size. And what it does is Bootstrap starts smallest and then works its way up. So you start with the smallest screen size you're going to be working with. In this case, the S12 would mean that on the smallest screen size, you're going to use the full 12 columns for this piece of content. You can actually override that. If you don't have anything more, it's just going to use that S12 all the way across. So regardless of device size, it's going to stay the full width. But we can override it. These pink ones, you can see M6. That means on medium-sized devices, they're going to split in half. And so it's going to be 2 rows of half each instead of the 1 row of 12, because we're now moving up to the medium devices and overriding that S12. And then the greens, you can actually see that those do M4, and so it splits them into thirds, because 4 is a third as well. And then you can actually see, before we move on to the next one, that the L's don't actually have to be the same. So for this green row, you've actually got 2, 8, and 2, which will actually make a better, you can make it more flexible in terms of the way that the grid will actually display. So we can have varying grids. So this one could be the main content with some sidebars if we wanted them to be. And those will gracefully kind of change as we go between device sizes. And just a quick code overview just to show you what we're talking about. This is the Bootstrap class for this S12 one. And you can see all we have is on small devices, make it 12 across, and it'll work all the way across, even though this is our desktop version. And then the green ones, we have the 3 with the 3 different classes again inside the row. And you can see that we create a new row each time. And then the pink, same sort of thing. So now that we have this front end piece, you can see that's actually very similar to the way that paragraphs works. And so now we need to find a way to kind of integrate the two. So we're going to build some stuff. First thing we need to do, because it's Drupal, is we've got to install some modules, because that's what we do. So here are a couple modules that we're going to need up top. We use the Bootstrap theme, of course, because this, the title of this wouldn't be right if we didn't. Then there's also this newer module called Bootstrap Paragraphs, and we're going to touch on that in a little bit. But it's going to actually do a lot of some of the early versions of this that I've done. We had to kind of dig a bit deeper into the weeds, but this does a lot of what we're looking to do instead for us already. And then just a couple of useful admin modules I'd like to point out. There's the admin toolbar, which if you've used the admin interface of Drupal, you have that toolbar at the top. This just turns that into a dropdown that you've probably seen through some of the other presentations. Really helpful to kind of get around the admin interface a lot more quickly. I don't actually know how to pronounce this one. I think it's Devel. I've been made fun of for calling it that or Deagle, but I think it's Devel. And that just adds a lot of developer tools into Drupal. So we can do things like create a bunch of dummy content to test things and make sure they show up where we want them to. And we can clear the cache through the UI if you need to do things like that. So it's just small developer things that you may need to do, especially from a design standpoint. And this makes it a lot easier. And actually, the two of them combined, where if you have the admin toolbar, it'll put a Devel dropdown that will give you a lot of these options really quickly. So now we've got this Bootstrap theme installed. We're going to create some paragraphs. And there's a couple different ways, a couple different approaches that we can do here. And just up front, I'm going to tell you we're going to do this first one. And I'll tell you why. So I'll talk about the other two first. So the one on the far right is what we can do is the approach is we can create a separate paragraph that is a combination of the row and the content inside it all at once. So we can have a one-column image, like a full-width image, and a full-width text. Then we can also create a two-column image where we can create two columns with images in each. Or we can have two columns with text in each one, or we can create another one that's two columns with text and an image. And that would work fine if we only had a couple of these to make, and they were very structured, and we knew exactly what we needed to, and weren't going to be adding any more. But that gets to be a lot of work really quickly for our example here. Now, this middle idea is actually how Bootstrap Paragraphs handles this idea of rows of content. And what they do is they just give you one specific row paragraph, and inside that you can add whatever content you want, as many as you want, and Bootstrap will just figure it out, because if you write the width, it just Bootstrap on the back end will figure out how many are in there and split that up evenly. So you could do that. You could have just a row with content, and then we'll figure out that there's three, so we can split that into thirds. And if we added just one piece in there, we'll be okay, that's full width, and that's great, and it's really easy. The reason why I don't quite like this one is because it gives us enough control, I think. I'm a bit of a control freak in this sort of way. And someone like my mother putting a whole bunch of stuff in there that shouldn't be, so having one row of 5 accordions or something like that, where each accordion is about this big, and when you open it, it kind of scrolls again down to the under the floor here. So what I like to do is kind of somewhere in the middle. And so we have our rows that we designate as different columns. So we can have a row that's a full width row, a 2-column row, a 3 and a 4-column row. And each one of those, we can add the content paragraphs as fields. So in the 4-column row, you're only ever going to be able to add 4 things. The other part of this is that we're going to be able to limit what those 4 things can be. So again, like I was saying, we don't want people to be putting probably accordions in a 4-column row, because it's going to be really small, really hard to read, and not look very good. So we can just exclude accordions from being in a 4-column row. That's a problem solved. So we're kind of almost saving some of these users from themselves and trying to kind of mitigate these problems before they actually happen. So again, so this is our approach. We're going to have our row-based paragraphs, and then the content paragraphs. This is where I normally go into how we build these. But now all I say is install Bootstrap paragraphs, and it adds all these for you. And it's actually these plus a few more. The person who built it did a great job of building out all these different pieces into paragraphs. So that's a really good head start that we can get to actually do all that. But so normally I'd say build these first, because we need the content paragraphs in there before we do anything, because to build our full width row, we're going to actually have to have the content. So this is the back end of Drupal. And this is where I'm adding fields. So this is my 2-column row paragraph. And in there, I literally just have 2 fields, a column 1 and a column 2. And another trick is that when you do this, you can start with your 4-column row, because what we can actually do is we can reuse these fields over and over again. So we can create column 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then we go to build our 3-column. We reuse 1, 2, and 3 because they're already in the system. And so we just create them as paragraphs. That's what entity reference revisions is under. So we add paragraphs, and in there we just check which content paragraphs we actually want. So now we're kind of nesting paragraphs. We have at the top level we have our row paragraphs, kind of in the same way that Bootstrap has their row divs. And inside that we have our column paragraphs, which are the fields. And inside that is what we're allowed to add to. And so now we've got that, we're going to create a content type. A good use case for this, again, obviously, is a blog article, something like that. The one I've actually seen happen more recently are homepages, because homepages kind of have that slice of content field to another way. You usually have a big banner at the top, and then maybe some 3 callouts underneath, and then it kind of builds out that way. And what I like to do is create a content type homepage, create one homepage, and then not allow users like my mother to actually create another one, because you only ever need one using permissions. And then she can go and edit the homepage as she needs to, but she can't really break anything, which is really nice because I get less phone calls. So when we're creating this content type, what I like to do is I like to delete the body field because it comes installed by default all the time. But I'm not your dad, so if you want to keep it, that's fine. I just like to delete it. And what I do is I add 1 field, and it's before we're just adding a paragraphs field, which is 1, and it can be reused over and over again. And that in that field, I like to call them content slices, just because it seems to make sense to people. You're adding slices of content, and when you add a new one, you add a new slice, and there it is. Rows, anything like that, that the user understands as how to add content, how to build this content in this new way instead of using music. So in that field, instead of adding the content to it, what we're actually going to do is just add our columns to it. We're going to leave the content out. And so what that results in is when you create this new page, all you have is the title field, you can get rid of the body. And you just have this 1 field that says, let's add some content. And we hit the drop down, 3 is missing for some reason. But we have, we can add a column row. And so here we start with the teaching of, let's use my mother as an example. So we want to teach her, the first thing we want to add is maybe a big header image. So we use that 1 column row, and she would add an image to it, because we've allowed the image to be added to that row, and we'll integrate in a little bit what that looks like. And then we want to add a 2-column row. So we add a 2-column row. This is what it's going to look like. We're going to have our first column, where we're going to have our drop down of the content that can be added to it, and same with column 2. And so we can keep filling these out, right? So we can add the 2. Another thing we can do for this is we can actually manipulate the width as well if we wanted to. We could add a separate field that is kind of the split for it. For instance, we're using a 2-column row. If we wanted to be kind of 60-40 instead of 50-50 split, we could add that and then manipulate the classes in the back end to display 66 or compared 4 and 8, I think. My math works out. Yeah. So we can start doing things like that just to give them a little bit more control. So maybe they want the text to be a bit wider than the image on the side. But still, we're giving content creators a way to make this content their own still, but without breaking the theme of our site and turning every page into what created a whole bunch of pages that look like bake sale flyers. I don't know how she did it, but it was actually pretty impressive. She somehow got a hold of Comic Sans, even though it wasn't installed that I knew of. Sorry, Mom. I'm gonna keep apologizing to her just in case she watches this. I don't know if she did. All right, so we've got everything built out in the back end. We've got our front end idea. And so now we're going to kind of combine the two. What we need to do is we need to basically wrap this Bootstrap code, the divs with the rows and the columns and all that. We need to wrap that around our paragraph rows of content. And so the first thing we want to do is create a page with some content. And here's where I'm going to maybe get a little. We're not going to tempt fate. All right, I'll do a demo at the end, but for now we'll just kind of go through this because I don't want to. You saw how long it took to get this set up, so I don't want to break anything. So once we make some content, what it's going to look like, I'm going to ruin the surprise, but it's just going to be a row, a content where everything is just unstyled. We've installed Bootstrap and turned it on, but it doesn't actually do anything because we haven't integrated our code. I'm not going to go over all of this because you're all still awake, and that's good. And I don't think you would be after this. But this is just here. So if you wanted to come in here and grab this, this is how we create a subtheme in Drupal for the Bootstrap module. They have, when you download the Bootstrap theme, they have this starter kits folder in it. And we can just grab that, one of those starter kits, move it into its own module, and then kind of rename everything with our new module name. Create this new separate submodule. And when I say integrate, and from here on out, what I really mean is copy and paste. That's kind of all we're doing. So we just need to rename everything, and then go into the Drupal UI, into the appearance, and enable our module, because you'll see it there once you've renamed everything correctly. If the UI and it's not there, you probably missed all these things because there's a few. And then we need to copy some templates. The best thing I think about Drupal 8 is the Twig templating system. It's made the front end and back integration a whole lot easier. We have two separate teams. We have the front end team and us back end guys. And in order to integrate everything in the past with Drupal 7, it was a bit of a nightmare. But with Twig now, we've had them learn Twig, and we learn Twig, and now everything kind of fits together a lot more harmoniously. And so, yay, Twig. So we're not really going to want to make our own Twig files, because again, we're integrating. So we're going to copy and paste these things. First, grab some Twig templates from the Bootstrap theme. We're using these, and some of these are just I just kind of clean up some Drupal stuff, because when Drupal creates like paragraphs, it creates a lot of kind of crap around them in terms of dicks, inside dicks. Not as bad as Drupal 8 as it was in Drupal 7, but it's still kind of there. So some of these, like the Twig file, I think it's just to kind of just display the image content really wrappers around it. And then from the paragraphs module, we want to copy this paragraph, this default Twig file, and create it as our, and kind of copy it a few times, and rename it as whatever our actual paragraph names were. Another good thing about Drupal 8 is that it will actually tell you what you need to do. If you're training all the debugging stuff, this will actually show up in the output of your code. And so it'll tell you, this is what I'm using to display this content, and this is what you find. So for instance, this is our file name suggestions in terms of pre-templates. You kind of from broadest to most narrow. And also a little X next to which one it's actually picked to use. So you can tell if they're using yours or it's still using the default paragraph one. And it'll also tell you exactly the file name, the file path of where the actual template is. So if this is still pointing to the default paragraph one in the paragraphs module, you know that maybe there's something that's not made correctly or something wrong with it. And so once we've got it displaying correctly, we can actually override what we're doing. And this is where we're going to do the integrator. So again, this probably looked pretty familiar to what we had before when I was talking about the Bootstrap grid. But now we've actually got different content. This is our new twig format. And we're really just spitting out the fields each two-column paragraph again. And so that is literally the only code that's in that twig file. It's just this wrapping everything in each one. And again, if we wanted to add that field with the different width, 60/40 versus 50/50, we could redo that and print that out here instead. Do some kind of pre-processing to figure out which one's which. And now we have full control over the backend stuff, and it's responsive. It looks good. It doesn't look like a hand-drawn course. So this is what we end up with. So remember from before, we added some text into the first field, the first column, and then we added an image to the second column. And as long as all this is connected here and this, everything will print out correctly and it's responsive. I'm going to show you that in a minute once I finish here, just in case we break things. So what's next? This is all well and good, but as you'll see in a little bit, the interface is still a little bit clunky. There's still just a bunch of nested fields and things like that. And moving things around can be a bit tough. There's some things we can do about it, but it's still not really, really easy to use, which I think is the one thing that we still hear. I heard it earlier today somewhere else in one of these other discussions about how WordPress is still easier to use. And so I think while this is a step in our direction in terms of kind of the front end side of things, we still have some work to do on the back end in terms of making content entry really easy. This is the MailChimp interface. And I think something along these lines is maybe not the answer, but an answer. And what it is this left side is the actual kind of the preview mode, if you will. And the right side is all the different components. So what you can do is you can click and drag these components over to this side, including that one right there, which is different layouts. So you can drag a two-column layout over, and then you can drag different content into those. And then when you click on the actual content, so if I were to click on this text, this side would change to a text editor, and then I get the text. So I think this sort of idea is the next step. And I've started working on this, but again, I'm a backend developer, so I've started the backend work of this. If anybody has a lot better JavaScript than me would like to help, you're more than welcome. Feel free to talk to me afterwards. But there's also, let's see if I can play this video. Something, it might be yours. Where am I? There's also an experiential module in D8 right now that is a settings form. And we don't have to watch this whole thing. Okay. And so what it is when you enable the module, you can actually do a quick edit of things, and it'll slide out this sidebar here. So, and then you'll have all your edit options from the back end, all in that sidebar, and it's kind of snazzy. And you're able to edit different things on the actual site itself. So it kind of still has that feel of the of the MailChimp editor before. Let's see if we can edit these different block names and stuff. So you can change different fields and you can edit fields. I couldn't actually get this working with paragraphs yet, so I think there's some integration to do it. This is your integration, copy and paste integration. But I think this may be the next step towards the answer of the backend just as easy as we've now made the front end of things. So I think, yeah, so before we call it quits here, let me see if I can show you a quick demo. It's gonna be tough to do. Here we go. Okay, you see that? That's nice and large. Let's hide that. So this is my responsive yoga page that we've got here. And so let's take a look at the edit. So what we have is we have, again, our title, and then we have our content slice. And this is a little squished. But so this is, a lot of this is what Bootstrap paragraphs comes with. So when I add an image here, it comes with this background and width, which if we're going to be building it with this style, probably leave the background with the width no longer matters to us, so we can get rid of that field. The image comes with some fanciness as well. And then, so once we've uploaded that, you've seen the content. And then our 2-column row, again, this is our, let's see if I can get a lot of this on here. We just added what Bootstrap paragraphs calls the simple content, which is just a simple WYSIWYG. And these are sorts of WYSIWYG that we don't mind giving people. You know, it's some pretty basic stuff. You know, the format they can, headers and things like that, just to break things up. But for the most part, we're not going to have comics and show up. We're not going to have images showing up on here. It's just, this is for text, and that's what this specific piece is for. So I'm now kind of componentizing things. Yeah, I'm not even sure that's a word, but I think you understand what I mean. And then I've added an accordion here. Again, same thing. This comes with the Bootstrap paragraphs module. So if we want to change the color of the background, we could. And then we've added an accordion, and so the accordion has different items. So we can add as many items as we want to this, because again, these are paragraphs, and we can move them around as we need to. And in fact, we can actually add different stuff inside the body of the accordion. So you can see here, I just added a couple of those. I'm not going to bore you with that. We could add another row, but here we go. We add a 1 or 2 or 4-column row. If we added a 4-column row, you can see our 4 columns and the ability to add different things. But say, this is what I was talking about when I meant we can adjust what type of content we want to add to these. So you can see here, there's no option of adding an accordion, because accordion, a quarter of this is probably not going to look great. So we just don't give them the option. And so now, sorry, Mom, she can't screw it up. She had an accordion still, but not in a place where it's not going to work for the end user, and the people are going to come in to her little preschool site and actually view the content. And so when we view this page, we'll see. We have our 1-column row with the image. I can do, but that's about it. Like I can put a Drupal head on a yoga body, and that's it. And then here's our 2 rows, right? An accordion that actually accordions. And just to prove I'm not lying about, see if I can get the corner of this. Responsive, oh. Might be a liar. Well, yeah, that's a good call. Ooh, didn't work. Oh, good Lord. Oh man, there it is. So if we do this, let's hide that for you. Come on. So we can now see that content has been this is difficult. Come on. Oh, sorry. Show you an iPad. So we do have our content that is responsive, and yet so it is responsive, and it's still something that at this point my mom, she might still have some phone calls, but it's something that she can actually add to the website herself without making it look absolutely, well, not terrible, but sorry, Mom. It doesn't look as good as she probably would want it to, I guess, is what we're trying to say. So, about it for me. Does anybody have any questions? No? Well, okay. Thank you very much, guys.